The disappearance. The emergency klaxons tore through the night like wounded animals screaming. Jerked awake in his quarters, heart hammering against his ribs. The red warning lights painted his small room in blood-colored shadows. He'd been on the colony world of for 8 months now, and he'd never heard those particular alarms before. That meant something very, very bad had happened. He pulled on his maintenance coveralls with practiced speed, muscle memory from his years as a combat engineer in the Earth Defense Corps kicking in. Old habits died hard. Even though he'd left that life behind after what happened on Titan Station, his body still remembered how to move when danger came calling. The corridor outside his quarters erupted with movement. Workers rushed past, tall reptilian beings with scales that shifted colors based on their emotions. Right now, every single one of them blazed crimson and deep purple, fear and rage. Grabbed the arm of a maintenance supervisor named Kay, one of the few who didn't treat him like a curiosity or a potential threat. "What's happening?" asked. Kay's eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangle on his elongated face, widened when they focused on. His scales rippled from red to pale yellow. Recognition, then something else. Hope. "The Queen's daughters," Kay said, his translator device rendering his clicks and hisses into human speech. "They vanished." Felt ice water dump into his stomach. Vanished how? No one knows. The Royal Guard found their sleeping chamber empty. The windows were sealed. The doors were locked from the inside. They simply... Kay made a gesture with his 3-fingered hands that had learned meant something beyond understanding. Gone. How old are they? The eldest has seen 4 cycles, the youngest barely 2. Kay's scales darkened to a purple so deep it was almost black. If they are not found before dawn. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Had learned about politics the hard way during his first weeks on this world. The colony sat on the edge of space, a trading hub where different factions came together. Queen S ruled this territory with an iron grip, maintaining peace through a combination of wisdom, strategic marriages, and when necessary, overwhelming force. Her daughters weren't just her children, they were the future of every alliance she'd built. If something happened to them, the delicate political balance would shatter. War would consume this region of space. And, along with the 300 other humans working in the colony, would be right in the middle of it. "Where's the Queen now?" asked. "In the command center, she's..." Kay's scales flickered rapidly, unable to settle on a single emotion. "I have never seen her like this. She is tearing the colony apart. Every room is being searched, every ventilation shaft, every storage bay." "Has anyone checked the..." "Everything," Kay interrupted. "The Royal Guard are the finest hunters in 7 systems. If the young ones could be found through normal means, they would have found them already." His mind raced. He'd been brought to because of his skills as a maintenance engineer. The colony's atmospheric processors kept breaking down, and apparently humans had a talent for jury-rigging solutions that shouldn't work but somehow did. But before he'd been an engineer, he'd been a combat specialist. And before that, he'd been a kid growing up in the Detroit slums, where you learned to think like both predator and prey if you wanted to survive. "I want to help," said. Kay's scales went completely white shock. "You, a human, the Queen would never." "The Queen is desperate," said. "I can see it in everyone's faces. You've searched everywhere I would think to look. Maybe you need someone who thinks differently." Kay studied him with all 3 eyes. Had learned that when it did that, they were weighing something important. "You would risk yourself for younglings?" Kay asked. "Your people have no stake in our politics." "Kids are kids," said simply. "Doesn't matter what species. If there's a chance I can help find them, I have to try." Kay's scales shifted to a warm orange, the equivalent of a smile. "Then we must hurry, follow me." They moved through corridors that had walked 100 times, but everything looked different under emergency lighting. Guards stood at every intersection, weapons charged and ready. Their scales rippled with aggressive reds and blacks. Several of them hissed at as he passed. He was used to it. Humans weren't exactly popular on. There had been a spacefaring species for 3,000 years. Humanity had barely left their solar system by comparison. To many, humans were primitives, clever with tools perhaps, but lacking in sophistication and honor. Had learned not to take it personally, most of the time. They reached the command center, a circular room with holographic displays showing every corner of the colony. At the center stood Queen S. Had seen her before, but only from a distance. Up close, she was terrifying. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, her scales a deep emerald that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her head was crowned with a series of bony ridges that swept back like a natural tiara. 4 arms, each ending in razor-sharp claws, gestured at different displays as she barked orders in rapid fire that his translator struggled to keep up with. Her eyes, 4 of them, arranged in 2 pairs, glowed with an inner fire that had never seen in any other. This was a being who could order entire fleets to war with a thought, who had personally killed 17 challengers to her throne in ritual combat, who ruled 3 star systems with absolute authority. And right now, she looked like every terrified mother had ever seen. "My queen," Kay said, his scales going pale in submission. "I've brought someone who wishes to help in the search." S turned and felt the full weight of her gaze. Her scales rippled through a dozen emotions in seconds: surprise, confusion, anger, and something else he couldn't identify. "A human?" Her voice was like gravel being crushed. "You dare bring a human before me at this moment?" "He has unique skills, my queen. He thinks differently then." "Out!" S roared. The sound shook the walls. Several guards moved forward, weapons raised. "Didn't run. He'd learned on Titan Station that running only made predators chase you." "Your Majesty," he said, keeping his voice calm and level. "I know I'm not welcome here. I know my people are seen as lesser, but I was a combat engineer for 12 years. I've found people in places they shouldn't be able to hide. I've tracked targets through war zones, and most importantly, I have no connection to your politics, no agenda, no reason to lie to you." S stalked toward him, each footstep a thunderclap. She loomed over him, all 4 arms flexing, claws extended. "You would swear this?" she asked. "You would stake your life on your usefulness?" Met her gaze, yes. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the holographic displays. Then S made a sound that's translator rendered as bitter laughter. "Then you are either very brave or very stupid, human," she gestured to the displays. "We have searched for 6 hours. My daughters are 4 and 2 cycles old. They cannot survive much longer without food or water. The eldest has always been curious and clever, too clever, but the youngest, Ra, follows her sister everywhere." Studied the displays, nodding the layout of the royal quarters. "Tell me about, what does she like? What scares her?" S's scales rippled with confusion. "Why does that matter?" "Because kids don't vanish into thin air. They go somewhere they feel safe, somewhere that makes sense to them," pointed at the hologram. "Everyone's been searching like adults. We need to think like." For a moment thought he'd gone too far. S's scales went completely black, pure rage. Then they shifted to deep blue. "Grief, raw and painful. She loves warm places," S said quietly. "And small spaces. She would curl up in the thermal vents when she was younger, before they became too hot." His mind clicked. "What about your quarters, your personal space?" "Already searched." "By guards?" "Of course. Guards think like guards. They look for threats, for hiding spots an enemy would use." Took a breath. "Where do you sleep, your Majesty?" S's 4 eyes narrowed. "You presume much human." "I presume that a scared child would go to the one place that smells like safety, like mother." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Then S turned to her guard captain. "Take him to my chambers, let him search." The guard captain's scales flashed red. "My queen, a human in your..." "Now." The word cracked like a whip. As they left the command center, caught Kay's eye. The maintenance supervisor's scales had gone golden. Hope. Just hoped he hadn't promised something he couldn't deliver. Because if those children died, he had a feeling the queen wouldn't just kill him quickly. The hunt. The royal chambers occupied the highest level of the colony's central tower. Had never been this far into territory before. Human workers were restricted to the lower maintenance levels and the industrial sectors. Everything here spoke of wealth and power. The walls were inlaid with crystalline structures that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. The floors were covered in what looked like living moss that changed color as walked across it. The air smelled of something like cinnamon mixed with ozone. The guard captain, a massive named or whose scales remained locked in aggressive red, kept one clawed hand on his plasma weapon the entire way. "If you have deceived the queen," or growled, "your death will be legendary in its pain." "Noted," said. They reached a set of doors that looked like they'd been carved from a single piece of black stone, or placed his hand on a security panel, and the doors split open. Stepped into Queen S's personal quarters, and immediately felt like he was trespassing on sacred ground. The main chamber was circular, with a domed ceiling that displayed a holographic star field. But it wasn't the grandeur that caught attention, it was the details. Small things scattered throughout the space. A collection of stones arranged by color and size on a low table. A piece of fabric with childish drawings stitched into it. A set of toy ships, crude things that looked handmade, sitting on a shelf. This wasn't just the Queen's chambers, this was a mother's room. The children's quarters are through there, Or said, pointing to an archway. But as I told the Queen, we have already searched every centimeter. Walked slowly through the space, trying to see it through a 4-year-old's eyes. The saw in a slightly different spectrum than humans. Their sense of smell was far better. But kids were kids, regardless of species. They sought comfort. They sought warmth. They sought spaces that felt protective. He moved into the children's room. It was smaller than the main chamber, but still larger than its entire living quarters. 2 sleeping platforms sat against opposite walls, each covered in soft materials. Toys were scattered across the floor, blocks made from some kind of ceramic, more handmade ships, and what looked like dolls. The window was sealed, just as Kay had said. The door showed no signs of forced entry. The ventilation grates were too small for even a child to fit through. Stood in the center of the room and closed his eyes. Think like a kid, think like. Tell me about the eldest daughter, said, personality, habits. Or scales flickered with irritation. She is clever and bold, too bold for one so young. She has no fear of heights. She challenges the guards during training exercises. He paused. She likes to pretend she is a scout ship. She hides and then appears suddenly to report what she has seen. Opened his eyes. She plays hide and seek. I do not know this phrase. She practices hiding. She's good at it. Yes, the Queen has scolded her many times for causing alarm. Turned in a slow circle. A kid who liked to hide, who was clever enough to evade guards, who had a younger sister who followed her everywhere. Where would she go during an emergency? The alarm klaxons would have been loud, terrifying, would want to protect her little sister. She'd want somewhere safe, somewhere warm, somewhere no one would think to look. Walked back into the Queen's main chamber. He studied the sleeping platform, a raised structure covered in what looked like temperature-regulating gel pads. Were cold-blooded. They needed external heat at night. He knelt beside the platform. What are you doing? Or demanded. Didn't answer. He reached under the platform, feeling along the underside. His fingers found a gap. His heart rate spiked. Give me light, he said. The human makes demands. Give me light. Something in his voice must have convinced, or a beam of bright blue light illuminated the space under the sleeping platform. Lay flat on his stomach and peered into the gap. At first he saw nothing but shadows, then his eyes adjusted. There, tucked into a space between the platform's support structure and the floor, curled together in a tiny alcove that shouldn't have been accessible, 2 small children. Their scales were pale blue, almost white, the color of sleep or deep cold. They weren't moving. Found them breathed, or made a sound like a steam kettle exploding. He immediately activated his communicator, speaking rapidly in. Are they alive? He demanded. Was already calculating angles. The gap was barely large enough for him to fit his arm through, let alone his whole body, and the children were at least 3 feet back from the edge. I can't tell from here, said, but if they've been here since the alarm went off, they're hypothermic. The Queen's body heat normally warms this platform. Without her here, this space became a cold trap. Or's scales went white with horror. We must extract them immediately. If we dismantle the platform, it could collapse on them, said, his mind racing through options. And if we try to drag them out too quickly, we might injure them. They're wedged in tight. Then what do you suggest, human? Was already pulling off his jacket. I go in and get them. Impossible, you're too large. I'm smaller than any adult, and I'm warm-blooded. My body heat might help revive them. Before Or could respond, the doors burst open. Queen S stormed in, followed by a dozen guards and medical personnel. Where? She roared. pointed under the sleeping platform. "There, but your majesty, please." S dropped to all four arms and knees, her massive form blocking out the light. She made a sound had never heard before, a keening wail of desperation and relief mixed together. Ra, she reached under the platform, but her arms were too thick, her claws too long. She couldn't reach them without tearing the structure apart. "Your Majesty," said carefully, "let me try." S turned to face him, and saw something he'd never expected to see in those alien eyes. Tears. "If you harm them," she started. "I won't," said, "I promise." He didn't wait for permission. He dropped to his stomach and began wriggling under the platform. It was tight, way too tight. His shoulders barely fit through the gap. The support structure scraped against his back. For a moment, his combat engineer training warred with his growing claustrophobia. Then he thought about two little girls who'd been scared and alone in the dark for hours. He pushed forward. The space was dark and cold. The Queen's body heat never penetrated this far. Could see why the children's scales had gone pale. Their metabolism was slowing down. "Come on, sweetheart," whispered as he reached the first child, the smallest one. "Ra, let's get you warm." He touched her scales gently. They were ice cold. Carefully, moving with the deliberate precision he'd learned diffusing bombs on Titan Station, worked his hands under the little girl's body. She was surprisingly light, maybe 30 pounds. Her scales were smooth under his fingers, nothing like the rough texture of adult. He pulled her close to his chest, feeling his body heat start to transfer to her. Then he reached for the older sister. Was curled around Ra protectively, even in her cold-induced stupor. Had to gently pry her away. "Your mom's here," he whispered. "You're safe now, both of you are safe." With both children pressed against his chest, began the agonizing process of wriggling backward. Every movement had to be controlled. One wrong angle and he'd crush them against the support structure. His back scraped against metal, his shoulders screamed in protest, but he kept moving. Finally, hands grabbed his legs and pulled. He emerged into the light, still clutching both children to his chest. Queen S made a sound like a dying star and reached for her daughters. But the medical team was already surrounding, scanners active. "Their core temperature is dangerously low," one of the medics said. "We need to warm them gradually or risk cellular damage." "My body heat," said, "I can help." The medic, older with silver-edged scales, studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Sit against the wall, hold them close, we'll monitor." Did as instructed, settling with his back against the warm wall of the chamber. The two little girls were still limp in his arms, their scales so pale they were almost translucent. But as he held them, he felt something change. Their scales began to darken slightly, from white to pale blue, then to a healthier green. The medic made an approving sound. "It's working. Human body temperature is ideal for gradual warming." Queen S knelt beside, all four of her eyes fixed on her daughters. Her scales rippled through a dozen emotions: relief, fear, gratitude, and something else. "How did you know?" she asked quietly. "I didn't," admitted. "I just thought about where I would hide if I was scared, somewhere close to my mom, somewhere warm, found the perfect spot, too perfect." "She saved her sister's life," S said. "When the alarm sounded, she must have thought we were under attack. She took Ra to the safest place she knew." "Smart kid." "Too smart for her own good," S said. But there was a tenderness in her voice that transformed her from terrifying queen to exhausted mother. Stirred in arms, her three eyes flickered open. They were a brilliant amber color, nothing like her mother's. She looked up at and made a small chirping sound. "Hello," said softly. "You gave everyone quite a scare." Chirped again, then shifted closer to his chest, apparently enjoying the warmth. Her little sister remained unconscious but was breathing more easily now. The medic checked them both again. "They'll be fine. The human's intervention prevented permanent damage." S reached out with one clawed hand, then hesitated. "May I?" Carefully transferred both children to their mother's arms. S gathered them close, all four arms cradling them protectively. Her scales went completely golden, pure joy. "You have my gratitude, human," she said. "Ask anything of me, and if it is within my power, it shall be yours." Stood, his muscles protesting after being wedged under the platform. "I don't need a reward, Your Majesty. I'm just glad they're safe." S studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. You are strange among your kind. I have met humans before. They always want something. Maybe I'm not like other humans you've met. Before S could respond, chirped again and reached one small hand toward. The room fell silent. Or scales flashed red. The young one reaches for. Silence, S commanded. She looked at her daughter, then at, she wishes to stay with you. Didn't know what to say. I should probably go, let your family. Chirped more insistently. Ra's eyes flickered open as well. She made a similar sound. The medic spoke quietly. They associate him with safety now, with warmth. It's a natural bonding response. It will pass. But something in the way S looked at made him think. This was more complicated than the medic suggested. You will stay, the Queen said. It wasn't a request. Your Majesty, I really don't think. The royal quarters have chambers for guards and attendants. You will occupy one tonight. My daughters have bonded with you. Breaking that bond prematurely could be traumatic. Looked at Or, whose scales clearly said he'd rather eat glass than have a human sleep in the royal quarters. Just for tonight, said carefully, until they settle down. S nodded, just for tonight. But the way she said it made think she had other plans. Plans that probably involved him more than he'd bargained for. The bonding. Spent the night in a small chamber adjacent to the Queen's quarters, listening to the sounds of family life through the walls. Children chirping, a mother's soothing rumble, the occasional clatter of movement as someone, probably guards, checked on them. He didn't sleep much. When dawn came, or what passed for dawn on, which was more like the planet's sun cresting over the perpetual storm banks, was summoned back to the main chamber. He found Queen S sitting on a raised platform with both daughters curled against her sides, was awake and alert, her amber eyes tracking movement around the room. Ra still seemed sleepy, making small chirping sounds. The moment saw, she perked up and made an excited trill. S's scales flickered with amusement. She asks for you. I don't speak, Your Majesty. Then you will learn. S gestured to a spot near the platform. Sit, we must discuss what has occurred. Sat cross-legged on the floor, feeling distinctly uncomfortable. Behind the Queen, Or and 3 other guards watched him with barely concealed hostility. What happened last night was unprecedented, S began. My daughters bonded with you, not just superficially, the medics confirmed it. They imprinted on you as a source of safety. Kids do that, said. It'll fade. Perhaps, but until it does, I cannot risk their emotional health by separating them from you abruptly. S's scales shifted to a deep purple, serious intent. You will remain in the royal quarters as their attendant. Felt like he'd been hit with a stun baton. What? Your Majesty, I'm not qualified to. You found them when my finest hunters could not. You risked yourself without hesitation. You showed them kindness. S leaned forward. Do you know how rare that is? Most beings seek my favor for personal gain. You asked for nothing. Because I don't want anything. Exactly, S's 4 eyes gleamed. That makes you uniquely valuable and uniquely trustworthy. Looked at the 2 little girls, was still watching him with an intensity that was unsettling in someone so young. Ra had started to doze off again, her scales pulsing in a gentle rhythm. I'm a maintenance engineer, said, not a nanny. You were a combat engineer, before that a soldier. I have access to Earth's military records. S's voice hardened. I know about Titan Station. I know what you did there. Felt his chest tighten. Then you know why I left the military. I know that you disobeyed orders to save civilians trapped in a collapsing habitat. I know that your superiors punished you for it. I know that the 17 families you saved would be dead if you had followed protocol. I also know, said quietly, that 3 of my squad died because I made that choice. The room fell silent. S studied him for a long moment. You carry guilt like armor, but guilt does not make you weak. It makes you careful, thoughtful. Exactly the qualities I need around my daughters. Why, asked. Why would you trust a human with your children? Your people barely tolerate us. Because last night, when everyone else searched for my daughters as if they were lost possessions, you searched for them as if they were your own children. S stood, her full height dominating the room. That is why I trust you. Before could respond, scrambled down from the platform and walked straight toward him. She was smaller than expected, barely coming up to his knee. Her scales were a soft green with golden undertones, and her 3 eyes were bright with curiosity. She chirped at him, then climbed into his lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Froze, Your Majesty. S's scales rippled with something that might have been laughter. She has decided you are acceptable. Congratulations. Settled against chest, making a contented thrumming sound. Her scales were warm against his skin, and he could feel her small heart beating rapidly. What do I do? Asked, feeling completely out of his depth. What you did last night. Keep her warm, keep her safe. S sat back down, gathering Ra more securely. We have much to discuss about your new duties. Over the next hour, S explained the situation. The disappearance of her daughters had not been an accident. Someone had activated the emergency alarms deliberately, knowing the children would react by hiding. It was meant to look like they'd been kidnapped or killed. Who benefits from your daughters dying? Asked. Several factions. S's scales darkened to black. My rule is built on alliances through marriage and shared offspring. Father is the leader of the northern clans. Ra's father leads the trade consortium. If my daughters died, those alliances would crumble. War would follow. So someone wants a war. Someone wants chaos. In chaos, power shifts. New opportunities arise. S gestured at the displays around the room which showed various officials. Any one of these beings could be the architect, or none of them. Until I know who triggered the alarm, my daughters remain in danger. Looked down at who had fallen asleep in his lap. So small, so vulnerable. You need to keep them close, said, under constant guard. Yes, but there is a complication. S stood and walked to a window overlooking the colony. In 3 days, I must attend the Confederation Summit on the sister world of. Every planetary leader in the sector will be there. I cannot refuse without appearing weak. Take your daughters with you. Impossible. The summit is in neutral territory. No children allowed. Too many political complications. S turned back to, I must leave them here under protection. Saw where this was going. You want me to watch them. You and a hand-picked security team. But yes, primarily you. My daughters trust you, especially has bonded strongly. Where she goes, Ra follows. Your Majesty, I'm not trained for. You're trained to survive, to think under pressure, to protect the innocent. S's scales went solid gold, absolute determination. And most importantly, you have no political connections to exploit. You cannot be bribed or threatened with status you don't care about. Wanted to argue, but chose that moment to stir in his sleep, making a small, distressed sound. Without thinking, adjusted his hold, rocking her gently. The little girl settled immediately, her scales brightening. When looked up, he found S watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You already know how to care for them, the Queen said softly. You just don't realize it yet. I'm going to need help, said. I don't know anything about child development, dietary needs, sleep patterns. You'll have the royal physicians and child specialists available at all times, or will assign guards. Or scales flashed red at that, but he said nothing. 3 days, said. I'll do it for 3 days while you're at the summit, then we figure out a more permanent solution. Agreed. S moved back to her platform. Though I suspect the permanent solution will involve you more than you expect. Over the next 2 days, received a crash course in caring for children. He learned that they needed high-protein meals 6 times a day, that they absorbed heat through their scales, so temperature regulation was critical, that young communicated as much through scale color as through sound. He learned that was stubborn and brilliant, already reading at a level beyond her age. That Ra was quieter but more emotionally sensitive, taking cues from her sister. He learned that both of them had nightmares about the emergency alarm, and that the only way to calm them was to hold them close and let them feel his heartbeat. It's the rhythm, one of the physicians explained. Human heartbeats are slower than it has a calming effect on young ones. Also learned that caring for children, any children, was exhausting. By the evening of the 2nd day, he was running on caffeine and determination, had discovered that she could climb like a tree, and she delighted in perching on his shoulders. Ra had decided that lap was the best place for naps. You look terrible, Kay said when he visited. The maintenance supervisor had brought some earth food, real coffee, and protein bars from the human quarters. I feel terrible, admitted. They were in a side chamber while the girls napped in the main room supervised by guards. But they're good kids, smart as hell too, keeps asking me questions about Earth. How many moons do we have? What do our oceans look like? Whether humans have scales? And you answer. Best I can, half the time I need a translator to explain properly, but she's patient with me. Took a long drink of coffee. I never thought I'd be doing this. Playing nanny to Queen's children. Caring about anyone again, stared into his cup. After Titan Station, after I lost my squad, I swore I'd keep my distance from people. Easier that way, can't lose what you don't have. Kay's scales shifted to sympathetic blue. But these children, they have gotten past your defenses. Yeah, smiled despite himself. They're impossible not to care about. Fearless and funny, Ra's sweet and gentle, they're just kids, good kids. The Queen chose wisely then. Before could respond, alarms blared through the compound. Not the emergency klaxons from before, something different, sharper. Or burst into the chamber, scales blazing red. Intruder in the royal quarters, security breach. Was moving before he finished the sentence. He sprinted back to the main chamber where the girls had been sleeping. Guards were already there, weapons drawn, surrounding the sleeping platform. But the platform was empty, and Ra were gone. Again,